You think she does not like you. You replay the conversations in your head. You analyze the pauses. You measure the time between her replies. You convince yourself that if she truly cared, she would be louder about it, clearer, more obvious. But attraction is rarely loud in the beginning. It is quiet. It hides in restraint. It disguises itself as normal behavior because sometimes the strongest feelings are the ones a person is trying hardest to control. Let me tell you something that might change how you see everything. If you notice this one pattern, she is thinking about you far more than you realize. Not occasionally, not casually, nonstop. But before I reveal it, you need to understand something about female psychology. When a woman truly likes a man, especially in the early stages, she does not always increase intensity. Sometimes she increases awareness, and awareness is subtle. She becomes more conscious of how she appears around you, more conscious of what she says, more conscious of how often she reaches out, because desire makes a person vulnerable, and vulnerability makes a person cautious. So instead of leaning in dramatically, she may actually pull back slightly, not because she is losing interest, but because she is feeling too much. Now, here is the sign. If she finds small reasons to re enter your world consistently, she is thinking about you nonstop, not grand gestures, small re entries, a random message about something you mentioned days ago, a meme that connects to an inside joke, a question about your opinion on something trivial, a like on a story posted hours later, a comment that revives an old conversation. These are not accidents. The brain does not repeatedly circle back to someone it feels indifferent toward. Psychologically, when a woman is attracted, dopamine reinforces thoughts about the person. The brain begins associating you with emotional stimulation. That stimulation does not disappear when the conversation ends, it lingers. And when something lingers, the mind looks for reasons to return to it. If she did not like you, silence would feel natural. But if she keeps finding subtle ways to reopen the door, it means you are occupying mental space. Now let us go deeper. You may notice that sometimes she takes longer to respond than expected, and you interpret that as lack of interest. But look at the pattern, not the delay. Does she respond thoughtfully? Does she reference previous details? Does she continue the thread instead of ending it? Does she ask follow-up questions even after pauses? If yes, she is engaged emotionally. A woman who is not interested closes loops quickly, short replies, no follow-up, no expansion. But a woman who is thinking about you cannot resist continuing the exchange, even if she pretends to be busy, because the connection matters to her more than she wants to reveal. There is another sign. She mirrors your emotional tone. If you are playful, she becomes playful. If you are reflective, she becomes deeper. If you pull back slightly, she adjusts subtly. Mirroring is subconscious bonding behavior. The nervous system syncs with what it values. If she did not care, she would not adapt. Adaptation requires attention. Attention requires interest. And interest requires emotional investment. Now, here is the deeper layer most men overlook. If she remembers small details you barely recall mentioning, she is thinking about you when you are not there. Because memory strengthens around emotional charge. If you told her your favorite childhood movie and weeks later she brings it up casually, that means your words stayed with her. If you mentioned being stressed about a project and she checks in days later, that means she was thinking about your state long after the conversation ended. People do not store details about someone they are indifferent toward. They store details about people who matter. But why would she not just tell you directly that she likes you? Because clarity creates risk, and risk requires courage. If she senses you are uncertain, she may protect herself by staying subtle, not cold. Subtle. There is a difference. Cold energy withdraws completely. Subtle energy maintains connection, but avoids exposure. You must learn to read that difference. Another powerful indicator is emotional fluctuation around you. If she becomes slightly nervous, if her voice shifts, if her laughter increases, if she teases you lightly but watches your reaction carefully, that is not random. Teasing is often disguised affection. It is a safe way to create closeness without openly confessing desire. She pushes lightly to see if you push back playfully. She tests emotional chemistry without stating it. If she did not care, she would not test. She would not care about the outcome. But when she cares, she measures everything. Now, let me tell you the most telling sign of all. When you pull your energy back slightly, she feels it, and she responds, not dramatically, but noticeably. If you become less available for a few days and she reaches out first, if you delay a reply and she sends a second message, if you shorten your responses and she expands hers, that means your presence affects her emotional state. Indifference does not react to absence. Attachment does. If she was not thinking about you, your silence would not register. But if your silence creates movement from her side, that means you matter more than you assumed. Understand this deeply. A woman thinking about you nonstop does not always look obsessed. It often looks composed because mature attraction is controlled. She might scroll through your photos quietly. She might replay your voice in her head. She might imagine scenarios with you, but she will not announce it. She will maintain her dignity, and dignity can look like distance to the insecure mind. You must separate ego from awareness. Just because she is not flooding you with validation does not mean she is not invested. Sometimes the strongest attraction is expressed through consistency rather than intensity. Does she remain present over time? Does she circle back even after quiet moments? Does she subtly prioritize you without dramatic declarations? These patterns reveal more than compliments ever could. Now, here is where most men sabotage themselves. They panic when attraction is not loud. They chase reassurance. They demand clarity too soon. They overtext, they overexplain, and that pressure pushes her further into restraint because now she feels your need instead of your presence. If you truly believe she might be thinking about you nonstop, respond with calm confidence. Do not interrogate, do not accuse, do not ask why she took long. Instead, match her energy steadily. When she re-enters your world, welcome it. When she invests, reciprocate slightly more, but not overwhelmingly. Let the tension breathe, because attraction grows in space. Space allows anticipation. Anticipation strengthens desire. If she keeps finding her way back to you, she is not confused. She is attached in a quiet way, and quiet attachment can become deep love if handled correctly. But it requires patience. It requires emotional steadiness. It requires you not to crumble under uncertainty, because the moment you become reactive, you change the dynamic. Stay grounded, stay centered. Notice patterns rather than isolated moments. Look at consistency over intensity. Look at subtle pursuit rather than dramatic confession. If she initiates in small ways repeatedly, if she keeps conversations alive, if she remembers details, if she reacts to your absence, if she mirrors your tone, if she teases with care, if she finds reasons to reconnect, she is thinking about you more than you think, maybe while driving, maybe before sleeping, maybe while pretending not to check her phone. And here is the truth that will set you free. You do not need to force what is already growing. If you notice this pattern, your job is not to chase harder. It is to lead calmly, invite her out confidently, speak with clarity, maintain emotional stability, give her room to step toward you. Because a woman who is thinking about you nonstop is already halfway there. She just needs to feel safe enough to move fully. So the next time you assume she does not like you, pause, observe. Look for the small returns, the subtle re-entries, the quiet consistency. Because attraction is not always a loud declaration. Sometimes it is a steady rhythm beneath the surface, and if you notice that rhythm, you will realize something powerful. You were never invisible to her. You were simply expecting fireworks instead of warmth, and warmth, when nurtured patiently, becomes fire.